Child custody case. Counsel for one of the parents. You can see the conduct that he engaged in. The judge held him in criminal contempt and fined him $1,000 at that point. The judge, using shades of Johnny Cochran, found that the conduct was obstructive, disruptive, and interruptive. I'm not quite sure interruptive is a word, but it flows so nicely. Now, the next day, the judge wasn't satisfied. Now, the attorney appealed, paid his $1,000 so he didn't have to spend the night in jail, but did appeal. At the evidentiary hearing the following day, the judge was like, you know what? That wasn't enough. I don't like your conduct in this court beforehand. I'm going to issue an order to show cause as to why you should not be prohibited from appearing in this district. What your Supreme Court said was, certainly the first contempt citation is valid. The attorney was put on notice of his obstructive, disruptive, and interruptive behavior, yet the order to show cause was dismissed. The second order of contempt was dismissed because he did not have due process to defend him. But again, this type of conduct will come back and get you, and judges being human sometimes, this judge not only had the chance to score her touchdown, she decided she would go for the victory dance in the end zone by hitting him with the order to show cause. And that, the court said, was a little over the top. Okay, in this action, I want you to look at this, and I want someone to say, what do you think really upset the judge in this case? Anyone have a guess?
Loosen this tie.
Loosen the tie! Look, he's cursing in court. He's stepping over the judge. He's basically saying that the petitioner is going to need a little facial surgery. That didn't seem to upset the judge. But when the judge was admonishing him for that behavior, he decided he would slouch back in his chair and loosen his tie. Notice Al warned me about ties in New Mexico being a sensitive issue. I have mine all the way up, and I will not loosen it. She hit him with a contempt order for this conduct. And what the court did, your Supreme Court, focused on his refusing to dress properly, not all that other bad stuff, as substantiating the contempt order. And during the hearing on contempt, this guy just didn't let it go. To quote, the judge wanted 3 sheriff's officers in the courtroom, her normal assignment of sheriff's officers. Judge, I want them out of here, because if I wanted to get you, I'm quick enough, agile enough, and athletic enough. I can get you, Judge. I can get you before these 3 get custody of me. Not the smartest fact to say. And what the court said was that conduct at the contempt proceeding, including shoving the sheriff's officers, which was all on tape. Again, watch the tape, folks. Was enough to substantiate the second contempt order. Now, you all look shocked. In New Mexico, attorneys should behave like that. Folks, this isn't a presentation that NAG's doing focused on New Mexico. This is something that all of us nationwide, especially in some jurisdictions, New Jersey being one of them, should be run more often. Because a lot of times, under the press of business, you're all short-staffed, your cases keep increasing, judges sometimes are intemperate, present company excluded, or intolerant. You have a lot of pressure on you day to day. Sometimes you forget the should aspect of how you're supposed to behave and just tend to remember the must. So it's not geared towards you. We're not here to give you a sermon. David alluded to himself as an evangelical minister because he likes to roam around. We're not here to convert you. We know you're competent. We know you're professional. This is just a general reminder, hopefully a humorous reminder at times, of the conduct we would all like to see, not only in this office, but nationwide.
Indeed. I see more great actors. I can't say I've ever seen an assistant attorney general from our jurisdiction come into my court. I'm sorry, I'll take that back. Only one time. but most of the time, by and large, you folks are pretty good. I think the purpose of this is to sensitize you to these issues when they come up, because more often than not, your opposing counsel will try to draw you into these things. And just be aware that, once again, you want to be the effective lawyer. You want to take the high road. You want to be able to see these things come and have some foresight and figure out how to address it. before it puts you in a bad place.
Okay, what might Atticus do? We're going to cut through these pretty quickly because they've already been alluded to in a large extent by what the judge and I have covered, certainly by what Mary Jo talked about, and David. Remember, our job is not necessarily, how many of you do criminal before I start? Okay, how many of you think your end game is to have the highest conviction rate in the history of the state of New Mexico? It used to be. Very diplomatic answer, sir. It's not. It's to see that justice is done. And if that means giving up a conviction or a possible conviction because it's the right thing to do, so be it. When I was a young assistant prosecutor, which really dates things, I'm saying me young, at some point, we had a case, marijuana distribution. Why, in God's name, we were prosecuting a marijuana distribution case in New Jersey? We were. The defense attorney, who I knew and had a good reputation with us as someone who was a straight shooter, who was that professional, said, Brendan, look at the videotape, and when you do, call me. So I'm like, you know what, I'll indulge it. He's a good guy, I'm going to indulge it. I looked at the videotape. I looked at it several times. I called in one of my investigators. I go, let's look at this together. What we found out was that the person who was apprehended was not, in fact, his client. It was someone who looked like his client. Could I have gotten a conviction? You know, I probably might have. I tend to get a little creative in front of the court. I might have gotten around the fact that, no, the person we arrested didn't have an umbrella like the gentleman's client, had different sneakers than the gentleman's client. I could have said, look, he went to the building. I don't know what he changed into while he was there, but we have him here, we have him here, we have the money, we have the drugs. We cut that indictment loose. Why? Not so I could keep my conviction rate high, but because under the circumstances, it was certainly the right thing to do. And that's something to be mindful of. Your clients, I mentioned earlier, those of you who may be administrative assistants, paralegals, investigators, it's our job as attorneys to remind you and to work with you that not only am I as the attorney acting hopefully in a professional and civil manner, but that you, as part of my team, when you're in that courtroom or outside that courtroom, are acting the same way. It does no good for me to be the nice guy and go to you, we really want to screw this guy over. I don't want to talk to him because he thinks I'm a nice guy, but here's what I want you to tell him. Folks, that doesn't work. It's inappropriate for me to do that. It's inappropriate for you to act in that manner. Again, aspirational. We aspire to do that which is right.
My employees, people that work for me, are subject to a code of professional conduct. It's our judicial employees' code of professional conduct. So the same way that you need to be in control of staff, and staff needs to be cognizant of these matters being civil, so does my staff. And I have to make sure that they're civil. If my staff is ever not civil to you or your staff, you need to tell me. I want to know. Because it's my judicial ethical obligation to make sure that my staff is as civil to you as we expect your staff to be to us.
Now, very quickly on always be prepared. This is something that ties into a point the judge and I will reference later on. A lot of times I'll get a newer attorney will come to me and go, when I was still supervising attorneys, that's another long story we'll talk about how that happened. When I was supervising attorneys, they would come back and go, the judge hated me. Well, how'd the motion go? I lost the motion because the judge hated me. All right, well, that doesn't sound right. Tell me what happened. Well, I got there 20 minutes late. I was up last night. The Giants were winning. The game went into overtime. I was in Hoboken. Hoboken's the hot spot for our young urban professionals. No longer called yuppies, but Hobokenites or Hobokenies. Hoboken has the highest per capita bar ratio in the state. They have more bars on each corner than any other city in the state. And in New Jersey, that's quite an accomplishment when they have it. So, okay, you're 20 minutes late. That happens. Okay, what else? When I got to counsel table, I told the judge, Judge, I really didn't have time to prepare last night because the Giants were playing. I figured he'd be a Giants fan. Well, lo and behold, he's a Jets fan. Okay, so that's strike two. And then when the judge was issuing his ruling, I didn't really like the ruling, Brendan. I think we should have won this. Okay, what did you do? Well, I pointed out to the judge that, there were There were problems with her fundamental lack of understanding of the issues before her. Okay. So what we find out is that lack of preparation by this attorney is really the reason the judge, quote unquote, hated her, not necessarily anything or any animus on the judge. Folks, always be prepared. I know it's hard. We alluded to some of the things you have to deal with, the pressures. But when you're before that court, when you are not prepared, that is signaling, and I'll certainly let the judge weigh in on this, a disrespect for that judge and the system as a whole.